Johnny Mac was there. Plenty of insight on our website, 973ESPN.com. You can check it all out on our new website. The Eagles will begin life without Darren Sproles. We'll dive into that. Inside the numbers at the left guard position, it was a significant difference when one was on the field as opposed to the other. And inside Jake Elliott's 61-yard kick. Let's start there, John, is how improbable of a finish is that game. Just the fact that the Eagles were in that situation. I guess Wings punt is really something that needs to be talked more, because if that's a typical punt, even if it's a lousy typical punt, 35 yards, they're not in that situation. So special teams, a huge factor in the game yesterday. But Jake Elliott, a guy I would contend most guys on that roster maybe never even spoke to yet, wins a game with a 61-yarder. Take us inside that play.
Well, you're right. A lot of things had to happen. You had the bad punt, and that's a punter who's typically pretty good and pretty effective. And then you really had to play to Alshon Jeffery, which if two Giants defenders don't collide, it's probably not completed. And if it is completed, they probably tackle him before he gets to the sideline. And then don't underestimate the clock guy at the length, because, to leave a second on the clock, let's put it this way. If that's in MetLife Stadium, the game's over. So that's one of those home field advantage things you get. And then I was just talking to Josh off air. You think about the butterfly effect and the fate of this game. If Caleb Sturgis is here, and he would be here if he didn't get hurt, you don't even attempt that kick because he doesn't have that kind of leg. But they have a kid who's got the monster leg. They try it, and lo and behold, you got the longest kick in franchise history.
So you don't think if Sturgis is here, they even attempt a 61-yarder, they go for a Hail Mary?
Yeah, definitely go for a Hail Mary. He doesn't have that leg, and it's not criticizing him as a kicker. It's just the realization, and this happened to Brad Childress a couple of years ago with Antonio Cromartie. If you kick those long field goals, and that's why the Giants had Odell Beckham back there, if the ball stays in play, you can return it. And you think about an explosive player like that, and think about who's on the field as far as the kickoff unit and protection. It's basically a bunch of offensive linemen and tight ends. So Cromartie took one back 109 yards. And you could see the same thing happening with Odell Beckham back there and people like Rick Lovato trying to chase him down. So you have to have tremendous confidence in the fact that even if it's missed, he's going to get it 61 yards, and that's what the Eagles had confidence in.
A lot of people thought when they got Jake Elliott that there was some thought that might be the end of Sturgis. This kind of is similar to the Cody Parkey thing. When they brought Parkey in, nobody knew this guy, and I don't remember who the kicker was before Parkey, but it was like,
Alex Henry?
Was Henry before Parkey, though? I don't know that he was the kicker before Parkey.
Yeah, no, it was Alex Henry who himself was a fourth-round pick, and Cody Parkey kicked so well. He was a Pro Bowler.
Right.
Yeah, and that happens. I mean, kickers, it's a tough existence for them. I mean, Jake Elliott's obviously a hero. Everyone's made the jokes about never going to have to buy a drink in Philadelphia again. That's overstated, because if he misses a big kick 3 weeks from now, he's going to be hung out to dry. I mean, kickers, the thing that defines them is consistency, and you got to make every single big kick, and that's just their existence.
You know, one thing about that play, is the fact that Wentz makes a big throw to Alshon, too. I don't know that play is being talked about a whole heck of a lot. That's a big throw, because I thought Wentz had Alshon early in the game, missed him deep down the field. He has not had a good season throwing the ball down the field. But that throw there, that's not an easy one. He ripped one into a little pocket right there.
No, yeah, he did. And I just mentioned you also had the two Giants defenders colliding. And if they don't, he might not even get out of bounds, and you don't get an opportunity to kick the field goal. And then, as I also mentioned, the clock operator at the link very deftly leaving a second on the clock. As, you know, if it's in MetLife, I guarantee you that second is not there. So all these little things came into play. But the bottom line is you got to have a kid who can kick it 61 yards. There's not a lot of people that can do that. Number one, it's Philadelphia. Number two, it's not Denver with the high altitude. It's the longest kick in NFL history by a rookie. So that kind of thing doesn't happen very often.
John McMullen's with us. Hey, what do the numbers say about the left guard play yesterday, John? Because that was a point of focus. Warmack gets the start, but then we see Wiz as well. How did that break down?
Yeah, I mean, Wiz completely outplayed Chance Warmack. The Eagles were much more effective when he was on the field, both as in run blocking and pass blocking. And we've talked about this on the show dating back weeks. I mean, this is their best left guard. And, you know, when Allen was here, I would say he's their second best left guard. This sort of pounding the square peg in the round hole, trying to get Isaac Seumalo on the field because he's a third-round draft choice, trying to get Chance Warmack on the field because Jeff Stoutman likes him from Alabama. I mean, at some point, you got to go with the guy who's effective. And it was night and day when Wisniewski was on the field. And I asked Doug today if he won the starting job, basically, and they still won't admit it. So, I don't know what they're looking for, to be honest.
Is Wisniewski the kind of guy that they take for granted? They just look at him like a role player, and they don't think that – because we had Barrett Brooks on earlier in the show, and he said sometimes you get labeled a backup, and people just think you're in that role. Do they have him in that mindset? They just can't see him any differently?
Yeah, and it's weird. It's a weird mindset because the Eagles have complete confidence in Wisniewski, and Doug kind of intimated that, and he said every time he steps on the field, you know what you're going to get. And then from the standpoint, but that's not good enough. Having complete confidence in a player because you want more. And that's what NFL teams fall in the trap of. They want more. Is he an all-pro? No. Is he solid? Is he not going to hurt you? Yes. And you don't have an all-pro. So until you get a player that can perform better than him, well, I mean, he should be on the field. And then the mentality of he's a great interior backup, which is true. He can play center. He can play both guard positions. So you don't want to risk upsetting the apple cart if there's an injury elsewhere. But you know what? He's a professional. He's been doing this for a long time. If he's going to move from left guard to center in game or left guard to right guard, he's going to do it, and you're going to be able to count on him.
Spending a few minutes with John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN Eagles insider and national NFL columnist for FanRagSports.com. How about the commitment to the running game yesterday, John? 39 carries for 193 yards. What does that say about the line in general? I mean, look, going in, everybody said you're not going to run. You said it too, through the tackles, Snacks Harrison, all that Giants defensive front, and the Eagles were able to run the football.
Yeah, they were. They were very effective, and basically everyone was effective. LeGarrette was, Wendell Smallwood, even Corey Clement, after Darren Sproles goes down with the dual injuries. So, hey, we always talk about, and I mentioned last week, is the part where Doug talks about the personality or the flow of a particular game. That's real. And for the vast majority of that game, the Eagles were on top. And at one point, at 14-0, it looked like it was going to be an easy game and an easy win. And that's as the sort of the run started piling up. And then on top of that, Carson Wentz wasn't effective yesterday. That was his worst game of the season, throwing the football. So all of that enters into it. But it was nice to see that the Eagles could actually move the football on the ground against a very good defense. And that defense, that's another part of it, guys. They probably weren't expecting the run game. So they were probably taken off guard a little bit, and also missing their middle linebacker to injury.
Yeah, Mike and I talked about it was a real hot day, too. That was a recipe to wearing out the Giants' front four defensively by running the football against them. LeGarrette Blount, you mentioned his name a minute ago. Do you think he came out with a chip on his shoulder after what took place? I mean, he wouldn't come out and say it, but after what took place in Kansas City, did he have a little chip on his shoulder? Was he running angry yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, you saw a couple of runs where he was just doling out the punishment, and that's what he does when he's at his best. So I think he did have a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. He was out to prove he's still an effective runner in this league, and he did a good job for the most part. Most of his yards were after contact, so he was hitting people, and he was moving the pile. So all of that is good, but then you look at the reps and count them up, and he still didn't get a lot of playing time. I mean, Wendell Smallwood was out there about twice as much as he was. So that's a clear indication that, probably moving forward, obviously it's not going to be Darren Sproles because of the broken arm and the torn ACL. He's gone for the season. The guy who's going to be getting most of the touches in this offense is going to be Wendell Smallwood.
Yeah, John, I'm going to follow up with the Sproles injury. How big of an impact? How do they fill it? How do you see the split kind of working? I mean, he is, of the 3 or 4, if you want to throw Corey in the mix, he's the one guy who is way different from the other guys. I mean, he is pass catching first, but he's also the blocker on a third down. He's back there pass protecting. So how do they fill the role of losing Sproles from here on out?
Well, I think you essentially saw it yesterday. I mean, that's probably sort of topping out. That's the most the Eagles are probably going to run the football in a situation like they were yesterday. And Sproles was only out there for, I think, 5 reps. So he was barely out there, and you got a feel for it. And Wendell was up over 40. I think Blount was at 22. And then Corey Clement kind of got a handful of carries himself. So that kind of tells you what they're going to do. And Frank Reich mentioned a couple weeks ago that Wendell has developed into a better 3-down back that they imagined. And part of that is pass catching, obviously, and pass protection. Now, the latter is where he still struggles. He had a great blitz pickup yesterday at one point, but he's not consistent in that aspect of the game. Like a lot of young running backs, not many of them are good early on in pass protection because they're just not asked to do it at the college level. So it's a work in progress, and it's going to be an issue because that's something Darren Sproles was really, really effective at.
Have we seen the last of Sproles in the NFL?
It's possible. I mean, we talked about it. Originally, he announced his retirement, said this was going to be his last year, kind of scaled that back and said he'll revisit it. This could be a situation where he doesn't want to go out like this, and he attempts to make a return. But remember, his contract is up. So if that's the situation, he may return in the NFL, but he may not return to Philadelphia because the Eagles drafted Donnell Pumphrey with the assumption he would take over that Sproles role in 2018. So it could certainly be the last time we see Darren Sproles in an Eagles uniform, and that's obviously a sad situation because he's been a tremendous player for this team. And one of the most effective, and more than that, one of the guys you can count on week in and week out. He was just a tremendous player for this team.
Who takes on that role as a punt returner? Do they go to Torrey Smith? Is there somebody else? I mean, did they only go to Smith because of the circumstances of being the middle of a game? Is there someone they go that they try to get Smith out of that role? That's a big loss for them at the punt returner spot.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a huge loss at punt returner. You're talking about one of the best ever as a punt returner, the best of all time, arguably. He's in that conversation. And Torrey was the first guy who got an opportunity. That's the guy Doug talked about today. But as we know, what Doug says on Monday doesn't necessarily hold true for the rest of the week. So, I mean, they've had a number of guys catching punts. You remember in the preseason, Donnell was used a lot, but he's on injured reserve now, so he's not in the conversation. In practice, at times they've used Nelson Aguilar, but I think Torrey Smith is much more shorthanded, so I think it's going to be his role, at least to start.
John, how about Jordan Hicks and Fletcher Cox, two guys that went out with injury yesterday? Any update on those guys today? Did you see those guys after the game, maybe in the locker room?
Yeah, I saw Fletcher leaving the locker room before they opened it to the media, and he had a little bit of a limp, but he was moving pretty well. So I thought that was a good sign, because if it was anything serious, they're certainly not going to let him leave. They would have had him in there for treatment and x-rays, and the trainers and doctors would have been talking to him. So that was a very good sign with his calf injury. And Jordan has an ankle. Doug labeled them both as day-to-day. So it's one of those things where it could be a week or two, but hopefully it's not anything longer than that.
Talking with John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. And, how about the play where Jerry grabs Qualls coming off the field? I mean, that's another huge play in this game. Did Qualls say anything after the game about that?
I did not get to talk to Elijah, so I don't have anything on that. But, I mean, it's a rivalry game. I mean, you kind of listen to Doug today talk about Odell Beckham and his celebrations, where he kind of, some people love Odell, some people really, really hate what he does, and mentioned the Eagles will file it away. I mean, this is an NFC East rivalry. It's just, these teams don't like each other, and they play each other again in December. It looks like, from the way things are going for the Giants, that might not be all that meaningful for them, but who knows in this league? You kind of saw it yesterday with, I mean, there were knockout pools getting obliterated. When you talk about the Jets winning, the Bills winning, the Redskins beating the Raiders and dominating the Raiders, just upsets all over the place.
Definitely a crazy week. John McMullen with us. So, John, during the game, I know my tweet was about 4th and inches, don't love having Wentz do that. And then later on I said 4th and inches, okay. 4th and 8, WTF, Doug. And today he's continued to be asked about that, and the pattern has remained the same. Last week the storyline was, hey, Doug, why don't you run the ball more? And he doesn't change his narrative on that, and he finds more stats to back it up. Today he was asked about the 4th and 8, and analytics, my favorite word, analytics came into it. What did he have to say about the 4th and 8 decision, even when pressed on that today?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bad decision. I obviously, he got asked a number of questions today on it. If it ended up being a loss, and even if the Giants scored, remember, the Giants got all the way to the 1 yard line themselves because of that missed 4th down, and they were blown up on that play, the Joe Walker tackle on 4th and goal. Otherwise, it would have been even a bigger deal. It's a head-scratching decision. I'm all for aggressiveness as a play caller. I think, by and large, NFL coaches are way too passive. I think when you see 4th and inches, even when you're on your side of the field, say 40+, the analytics at that point say you're going to get it. And if you have a 6'5" quarterback and you can't quarterback sneak for a few inches, you're a bad football team anyway. So I always advocate things like that, always. But when you're talking about 4th and 8, at that point of the game against a team that looked absolutely dead, were unable to do anything, you just punt the ball. Donnie Jones will pin him back. You go in the halftime with the lead. It was just a bad decision. It swung the momentum at the time.
We saw it, John. We saw it yesterday
in the Houston game,
where OBrien doesn't have the stones to go for it there. He kicks a field goal to put him up by 5 against Brady, which does you no good, and they lose that game.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, there's the one high school coach who never punts. Now, I think that is a little bit over the top.
I saw that on
as I said,
HBO Real Sports.
If you're plus 40 and you're 4th and inches, and I'm talking on your own side, you should always go for it. If you're on the other side and it's 4th and 1, you should always go for it because the numbers say you're going to make it, and you're just giving up by punting the football. And especially if you have a good offensive team and you have confidence in this team, as I said, with a 6'5" quarterback, you should be able to move the pile and get those 4th and inches play rather easily. And even if you don't, even if you want to run the football, that's what you brought LeGarrette Blount in. You saw him move the pile consistently.
And then on 3rd and 1, they handed the ball to Smallwood.
Yeah, some of those things are
mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And then on the 4th down play, you had Sproles back there on 4th down and 1. Now, they get it. Wentz falls forward, but you're essentially taking Blount out of there to give another option. Like, okay, Blount's in here. We got to focus on him. And then now, even though he gets it, I still don't understand why Sproles is the guy there and not Blount.
Yeah, and you know, this is the way the NFL is going, and it's become a much more situational game. So it becomes where you have these substitutions, and maybe you call a play, and maybe it's the position coach's responsibility who's doling out sort of the repetitions and the snaps, and you have the wrong guy on the field. It happens. It doesn't only happen in Philadelphia. This is why you kind of miss those days of having those guys, you know, the Earl Campbells of the world who played every single down. And if it were 3rd and 1, well, you were going to get it because you knew Earl Campbell wasn't on the field. You didn't have a running backs coach telling out to somebody else and saying somebody else has got reps. And remember, as the game goes on, you only have 40 seconds to do this.
Yeah.
So if you have this mentality of you're going to keep rotating guys and it's Wendell Smallwood's turn and it happens to come up that it's 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1,
right?
You get caught. And as I said, that's not an Eagles problem. That's an NFL problem.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, of course, national columnist at FanRag Sports NFL. And yesterday, John, obviously there was a bigger story than the games on the field. Many of it was off the field. The Eagles and teams around the league displayed some solidarity. You know, as a columnist who covers the league nationally, what was some of the talk around the league, and about the day? Because I think when people look back at Week 3 of the NFL 2017, they're not going to remember the results of these games. They're going to remember the other stuff.
Yeah, I think it's become a story that's gone far beyond football, and that's what happens when you have these stories that sort of make CNN and Fox News and the national reporters come in. It becomes much bigger than the games themselves. And hey, I talked about this with Sal in the press box, and before this week, think about this. Before this week, less than 1% of NFL players were protesting the national anthem for whatever reason, whether you want to call it social activism, police brutality. You're talking about nearly 1,700 players. And it becomes this bigger-than-life story. At sometimes, people drive these things for their own ideological advancements. That's the only thing you explain. I would just say, hey, the First Amendment is there not for the people you agree with. It's for the people you don't agree with. Everybody doesn't have to be in lockstep, and that includes everyone on both sides of the fence. If you support the president's remarks, I personally think they were stupid. He shouldn't worry. He should be worried about bigger things than the NFL. But great, he has the right to say them. just as NFL players have the right to protest the way they do. If everyone could accept that, we could move on and watch Jake Elliott kick 61-yard field goals and enjoy some escapist entertainment. That's what it's supposed to be. We're supposed to be escaping from this nonsense. And it becomes the top story of the day. I think it's sad, to be honest.
I do feel that in some aspect you're right, that it is sad that it has gotten this far. And I think it's sad that people can't allow other people that are not themselves to feel however they want to feel about something. I never understand why somebody else's feelings or opinions bother other people so much. You live yours, I'll live yours. You live yours, I'll live mine.
Exactly. I'll give you an example. There was some guy, and I'm not gonna give. There's another writer. I'm not going to throw him under the bus, but he tweeted at Tom Brady, who said he didn't agree with the divisive comments of the president, and he took Tom to task because he's called Donald Trump a friend, and he said, "How could you be a friend with a guy?" I'm like, you can't be a friend with somebody you disagree with?
Right. That's virtually saying, hey, a friend of mine's a Cowboys fan, and I'm an Eagles fan. Well, how could you be friends with a guy who's a Cowboys fan? Like, are you serious?
I mean, it is. And I think if people took a step back and look at it logically like that, if you agree with everyone about everything, or they're not your friends, you're not going to have a lot of friends.
John McMullen, for more on the Eagles, 97.3 ESPN.com. His Inside the Elliott Kick, the 10 observations on the Eagles win. Make sure you check that out. Plus, Inside the Left Guard play and the Eagles taking offense to Odell Beckham. Read that at 97.3 ESPN.com. Follow him at JF McMullen. Thanks, John.
Hey, thank you, guys.